Okay, today I wanted to talk about a story I've been reading, comic manga. I would say technically, I think it's not a manga because I think it is a Chinese story. So I was thinking if it got an anime, and I think the manga is coming out online, is where I've seen it in a few spots for it. But also the anime. I've been reading the comic form of it, and it's not really a great comic. It's I would say it's like okay. The way I would usually classify ones like these is they're like it's kind of like pop music, where it's or actually Candy is probably the better example. Candy, where it's yeah, I think Candy really explains it in terms of addictive, maybe sweet, not very satisfying, but it is enjoyable. Enjoyable, let's say we'll go with that. Enjoyable, but not satisfying, or not deep, basically, in that regard. Not deep or satisfying. I keep trying to think this is kind of there's another way you can look at this in terms of literature versus pop fiction. Usually there's something where it's really exciting and nothing but action. And then the literature, highbrow, the people with who look their noses down upon things over their mustaches, basically. Um, Look down upon it and are not a huge fan of it or anything like that. Um, let's see. Just drawing my man over here. I say it's not a good work of art. Um, and basically that's kind of one idea. The other things you could look at like your, and this would be like your, who's Virginia Woolf, something where nobody's really read. She's not really read too much. It's only the highbrow lit people that are basically reading this versus something like, let's see, Virginia Woolf. We'll put her over here. I want to say, and I've never actually even read it. I've never actually read any of her. I've seen half of the movie, the Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which was horrible to watch. It's a very, very well made play, but absolutely the most stressful thing ever. And then we have what we'll call lowbrow fiction, or fiction work would be someone like Jack Reacher is one where I would claim where it's really fun, it's action, it's good guys versus bad guys, mystery, kind of all that, but it doesn't classify as highbrow. So this is definitely very, very, very much what you would put in the lowbrow. In fact, I would say it's pretty lowbrow. But I thought it was interesting just because I'd like to take story elements and break them down into very building blocks, basically building blocks. So if we were going to build out the skeleton of what makes this story work, basically that's kind of where I want to focus on in terms of how they frame it. So ideally, you'll have a story where you'll have some sort of what I generally call building blocks. So this would be something like a tournament arc is a building block, or basically a block, story arc or building block, if you want to call it that. So basically what this means is that there is kind of a natural flow to the beginning. So what you do is you try out for the tournament, try out, and then you train basically, and then you see super powerful guys. Think of the ones that I'm thinking of is basically Dragon Ball Z is a good one where they do tournament arcs. Hunter x Hunter did a great one. Eminence and Shadow did one. We talked about that in an earlier one, which doesn't really quite count. I think Naruto would be another one that would count. Because like the Chunin exams are kind of basically a tournament arc for it. So this kind of, you can see that play out. But basically you have these super powerful guys. And then you have, fight one, basically. And then you watch your friend fight, side fight. And there's just this very natural progression, basically. And then fight two. And then you've got an upset, and then you've got the villain fighter, who defeats your friend in side fight 2, and they bully or are cruel towards the side fight, and this galvanizes fight 3, where it's the bully versus the main character, and then they defeat the bully. You know, it's basically what you're doing. This is a very clear kind of where you're building up the fight, you're stretching out. It's just very clear. And this is a thing that you can basically rinse and repeat in a sense. So basically you can kind of take this as an individual block and plug it into a lot of different stories, and it works. And you can even plug this into your own story where you have repeat tournament arcs. Now, you want to change it up generally because that's where you can get into where it can get stale, but it's always interesting to me when you have stories that just don't do that, where basically they have this building block or this aspect that they just kind of copy, paste, repeat, copy, paste, repeat, copy, paste. And you can kind of see this. I think I remember with some shoujo animes where they do is they have hot guy, basically hot guy, and then we have aloof girl. We'll call this the aloof main girl. So aloof girl goes into a venture. She tries to do something, open a candy shop, go on tour, help a friend out, do homework, try and compete in this thing, basically whatever venture it is. And then something happens to where it all goes bad, basically. Where there's outside elements, the weather's bad, the event's ruined, and then we'll say swoops in, saves the day, and then she's grateful, basically, and that's the building block, basically. And you can kind of do this a few different ways. So let's say the girl is operating a fundraiser. We could just come up with one real quick here. We'll say she's doing a charity fundraiser. And basically there's no food, there's no events, the event's going, there's no venue, something's collapsed, we've got weather, we've got this, that, or the other. She's working on it. So basically we have the build up where she works on everything, and then suddenly it all starts heading downhill, basically. Everything starts going to crap. The guy swoops in and gives a possible solution. They team up together, and this is usually what you want to do with romance, is you want to prove to the audience is that both characters are better together. This is the influence. Because what you want is you want the audience to want them to be together. So through the conflict, you need to show that they are better together. You're going to take this heart and that heart, and you're going to try and combine them so that they can be together. Swoop in, and then they go up here, and then victory, basically, where the day is saved. This is kind of how what I would call the axis basically works as far as this goes. So you're working up, then everything starts coming down, and maybe it's a few little of these. Maybe even the guy, you can change it up a little. Maybe the hot guy initially ruins the day. Maybe it's his fault the day is ruined. But basically, this is a building block you can apply, and you can kind of do this over and over and over and over again. The next one is, she's going out with a friend, and it's going really well, and maybe some instance happens where the friendship is ruined. And then what happens is the guy comes in and says something that fixes the friendship. It's the exact same situation, but instead of talking about something physical, we're talking about something emotional. So you can actually play that. So where the audience doesn't see that these things are the same, even though you're doing the exact same building block. So what Tales of Demons and Gods does, and basically this is 100%. And the reason why I'm not too as hard, because everyone goes, hey, this is one line I've used myself a lot, but people often describe music they don't like as it all sounds the same. And it's like country music all sounds the same. Rap music all sounds the same. Electro, EDM music all sounds the same. Pop music, it all sounds the same. Jazz music, it turns out if you don't like it, it all sounds the same. So it's not necessarily, that's not the real criticism. The criticism is if you don't like it, basically. And again, you might not like it for a good reason. But basically, if we've got it here, we've got this building block, and we like it, then you know what? You can feed it to the audience over and over again, and they're never going to have a problem. This is kind of where Solo Leveling basically did this, where it kind of follows the same arc of where you're trying to have characters, they encounter a challenge they can't do. Everybody underestimates the main character. He comes in, saves the day, and then maybe one person realizes that the main character is super, 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 super powerful, and then it's low-key from then on, and etc. And then on to next. Basically, there's kind of that building block, and then there's another building block, and then there's another building block, but they kind of all follow the same, basically the same thing, and this is kind of just how the plot advances, basically. So, what Tales of Demons and Gods does is basically you've got an interaction. So, schoolroom, classroom, tournament, family gathering, out at a restaurant, friends walking down the in the park, whatever the situation is. Then you've usually got a bully who initiates the thing, and they do an action of some sort. And because they're a bully, it's a bad action. You know, they're bad guys, so it's a bad action. So, bully does an action. The main character then reacts to this. So basically, they're going to do a reaction. So they're going to counter, basically. So they're going to reaction against the bully, basically, or against the bad action, basically. So they're going to be like, oh yeah, well you're dumb, or yeah, well you're not. Or they're going to bully someone, and the main character is going to step in. There basically is going to be a reaction, basically a counter. So what they're going to do is going to try to reverse this. There's a reaction. And then this sets up the stage for what makes all great stories, or what makes all stories in the end, which is now we've got all of this now equals conflict. Conflict, which is what? Potential. That's what we're looking at. This is what we need, potential. So now what we've got for the conflict, we got this down here, we got the main character versus the bully. And they're going to fight each other, and then basically they have an encounter and a test of mettle. Basically, they fight or combat in some way. This is if it's a cooking show, they have a cook-off. If it's a lawyer show, they debate, and he cites the correct law, which gets it out of that. A bit of bug flying around. If it's a writer, they're writing stories. If it's a chef, the cooking, I said that. Samurai, they're fighting, samurai. And in this one, they're doing their weird magical ninja spiritual power, demon specialist powers. They're going to fight, and then basically it is going to result in a victory for the main character. This is, again, not necessarily combat victory. It could be he scores an own, basically. If you own your enemy, you win, basically. Let's see. It's anything to show them up, basically. If you show them up, then you win, basically. And that's all it takes. Oops, show them up. All right, and then basically, then what you get out of this, and this is probably the most important part, is what you get is in this story at least, you get the respect and admiration from the side characters and the public audience. What I call, these are the audience, people who are the audience to the conflict, basically. So then we've got side characters. You get the admiration from side characters. So these are the other people who you're looking out. Maybe you were helping them out or something like that. Plus public. There we go, public audience. And then basically go on from there. So this is kind of what we've got to basically what's at play. So basically this is essentially how the story works. We start the bully action, does a bad action, reaction, does a conflict, and maybe this part could be repeated 2 times, could be 3 times, it could escalate. So basically the main character does something a little bit bad, and the main character reacts. And the main bad guy does something even worse, and the main character reacts. And this can go back and forth, and this is how you can change it up. So if you have a tournament arc, you can have, this can kind of basically fit within a tournament arc, because this is kind of an emotional building block. I would say this is kind of an emotional one. And again, these are just, there's no rules in stories. There's just, I would say, just patterns. And there's patterns that are easier to pull off and harder to pull off. There's no good or bad. I wouldn't classify it that way in any aspect. So then there's conflict, the main character bully, this, and then you get to basically revel. We, the audience, get to revel in being superior. We get to revel in being the smartest person in the room. We get to revel in basically just kind of a justice, vengeance fantasy. Basically, we get to see the bully get their just desserts and all that. But yeah, so this one's going to be a little bit shorter than normal, but I kind of just wanted to highlight this and kind of talk about this because I really like using this, because this whole reaction is something we can learn from and then use in our own stories. So if I was going to come up with a story about a chef, you come in, you have you can have we could be about chefs, or it could be about I don't know, it could be even about dog walkers. I'm trying to think of something that's actually difficult and hasn't been done before. So dog walkers. All right, so we're walking a little dog. We're going to walk a little dog. So we've got a little dog here, and this is what we're going to be walking. And then all of a sudden, MC, this is our main character plus the little dog. And then what's going to happen is there's going to be the bully character who's going to show up with a big dog. You guys guessed it. And then what's going to happen is there's going to be some conflict from here. And of course, need some conflict or else there's not much of a story. And maybe the big dog is trying to bite the little dog and something else happens. And what happens? Well, maybe the main character gets the bigger dog on his side. Or maybe the little dog, the main character knows what's going to happen. And kind of one of the key things for this is that the audience, the actual audience, knows that the main character is stronger, basically. And that's kind of the key part, is basically there's not much conflict in terms of, there's not much tension that the main character could lose, because we're all pretty sure that the main character is going to win. Because in this case, I probably should have mentioned it before, but the main character here is completely overpowered, ridiculously overpowered. Let's see, knows MC is OP, overpowered. And that's where they're basically waiting for the bully to stumble on this part. And so basically, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen. You just have to basically get the own. You have to get the own on your enemy. And if you can get that, on your enemy, then you get to revel in the bully getting their just desserts, basically. We all like to watch those videos where the bully steps up, picks on the quiet kid, and the quiet kid slugs him and just knocks him out, because it's really like, yes, that's what we think should happen. Basically, and there's a conflict, and then what happens is then the bully is then, and again, this one of the things is it's not just an individual one. Kind of what helps amplify this is the fact that there is a audience, the public, I'm calling the public audience in the story, or the story audience, basically. So these are other characters in this. So maybe there's a group of school kids, or it could be other dog walkers. It could be random people in the park. It could be a bunch of old people. It could be who knows what. Whatever it is, whatever reason people are there. It could be other dogs. If you want to tell a story from the perspective of dogs, then maybe the other dogs are like, rooting for the little dog to beat on the big dog. So they beat the big dog, and then you have this proven superiority, and you get to enjoy it. So this is kind of a dynamic, and this is something you can pull off in a lot, basically endless situations, and it works. That's the nice thing, it's kind of like chicken. It goes with everything. You could technically put this in there if you wanted it. Now, if you're trying to tell an Oyasumi Punpun, Goodnight Punpun story, which is a lot darker and everything, probably not really gonna use this aspect. If you're gonna do a Naruto one, that's when you can start seeing it come into it. So if you're trying to do kind of these more shounen action ones, then that's where this really takes off. So hope you guys learned something, and hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.